Hello, esteemed ladies and gentlemen of the Your Closet Case YouTube channel. How are we doing today? And welcome to my new house. This is where I'm living now with a whole bunch of other roommates. Oh, there I am. It's my Kurt Cobain poster, my Misfits poster, my Marilyn Manson poster, my absinthe metal thing. And this is my currently gross and dirty room. Now, a lot of the other guys this week have done a video on gender and the concept of sex versus gender versus sexual orientation versus sexual identity. I'm not going to do a video on that subject, mainly because even though that's actually what I study at university, I'm actually doing queer studies at Macquarie University in Sydney, or at least that's one aspect of my degree. I don't feel like I have the knowledge base or the personal experience to comment on that kind of thing. So, instead I'm going to talk today about an issue that has been raised recently in Australia in a big way, and that's the concept of the word gay. And the word gay being used by kids and young people to describe something they don't like. Like, oh, I can't go to this party, that's gay. And there's a big movement in Australia here at the moment to change the way people use that word and basically stop kids from using it as a negative term. And obviously the LGBT/queer community finds it offensive when people use that terminology, and they would like to see it stopped through education. They want to educate kids to tell them that using this word is wrong. Now, there are a lot of gay, bisexual, queer people that I know who would like to stop the use of this word and who find it offensive. They get very personally offended when somebody uses it. I don't use it because I know the connotations that word has for some people, for a lot of people. But in the end, I find that it's really not an issue that I care about that much. I don't think it's anywhere near as much of a problem as people make it out to be. And I certainly understand why people get upset if some kid's going, oh, that's gay, meaning, they hate something, and they're using a term that we identify as being a verbal representation of being homosexual. But see, here's the thing. Language changes. The verbal discourse changes over time and through generations. And I have a feeling, and this is my personal view, is that the word gay has now changed meaning once again. To people in my generation, it still means gay, homosexual, queer, whatever. But what began in my generation and has now moved down to the next generation of young kids is that it now means something that someone doesn't like. That's gay, that's gross, that's whatever. And it's definitely a word that is rooted, the way they use it today, it's definitely rooted in homophobia. It definitely has its origins in the fact that people didn't like, or they still don't like, a lot of them, but back then a lot of people didn't like homosexuality. They thought it was disgusting or gross or wrong or abnormal or unnatural, so they used the word gay to describe something they didn't like. But today you really have to ask the question, is there any actual tacit or implicit homophobia behind the use of that word? And I'd have to say no. I don't think there is. It now means, for a lot of kids, something different. It just means something they don't like. It doesn't mean homosexual. It doesn't mean homoerotic romantic relationships at all. It just means something they don't like. And that's a really tough thing for a lot of members of the gay and queer community to get to understand, is that yes, the origin of the meaning of that word being used as a derogatory term or rather as a negative term for something that someone doesn't like, yes, it's rooted in homophobia, and yes, it began as a homophobic slur and a slander against anyone who was gay or queer. But today, I don't think it means that. It means something different. The meaning of the word has now, I think, in younger generations or younger kids, the meaning has now changed. Now, I definitely understand why people get upset and why members of the gay community get upset, especially. Because to say something is gay, there is always going to be that inference for people who are queer or members of the LGBTI community as a whole. But here's the thing, even if this is an issue, there are two main points to remember, and the first and foremost point is this: we have a right to pursue our human rights and our self-determination and the right not to be harassed and harmed and bullied. That's a given. But what we don't have is the right to enforce upon other people, or we don't have the right to dictate the way people use their vocabulary. We don't have the right to dictate what language people use. And that simple fact, if that's a word that they choose to use, as offensive as it may be to someone, we don't have a right to tell them not to say that and not to use that word, because that is part of their personal language and vocabulary. That is not a right we have. But second of all, given what I've said about the fact that I think the meaning of the word has changed, and funnily enough, the word gay is a prime example. It used to mean happy and jovial. It then became a meaning for homosexual, which a lot of other people objected to. And now it has finally transferred into meaning something that somebody doesn't like. That's the way it's changed. But anyway, my second point was this. Even if it is an issue, if it is, and I would argue it isn't, but even if it is morally wrong or morally reprehensible to use the word gay to talk about something that you don't like, it is the bottom rung on the scale of homophobia that people have to deal with in day-to-day life. It is the absolute lowest common denominator. Not common denominator, but the lowest form of homophobia. We have so many bigger, more aggressive forms of gay hating and homophobia to deal with. The 12-year-old kid who stubs his toe and then goes, "Oh, that's gay," he's not the enemy. He has never been the enemy. He is not hurting anyone. If you get offended by his use of that word, that's fine, but that's on you. It's not on him. The real homophobia comes from someone who calls a gay man a faggot and then verbally abuses him on a public street, or worse, attacks him and beats him half to death. The real homophobia is teachers who teach creationism in class, who teach that homosexuality is an abomination and wrong. The real enemy is homophobic education, is religion instilling homophobia on the general public. It's politicians not willing to take a stand against homophobia, not willing to give queer and LGBT citizens the rights that they so dearly need and deserve. That's homophobia. That is what we have to deal with. Not the kids using gay as a bad word. That's nothing. That's infinitesimal compared to what real homophobia is. So, in the end, those are my thoughts on that. I realise it's been a long, winding spiel, but yeah. But you may disagree with me, and if you disagree, put a comment below. I'd love to hear what other people think about this issue. My question is it wrong to use the term gay to describe something you don't like? Is it an issue we should be dealing with? Is it something we should be approaching in education, in school, in society in general? Thanks very much, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week.